This is the Church of St. Paul in the Desert.
In the name of the Holy Trinity, one God. Please be seated. I am a newcomer to this community and this town. In fact, it is my first visit not only to St. Paul's, but also to Palm Springs. Given that, you'd think I'd be cautious about offering you directives, but I'm going to dive right in. Today, you'll really need to let go of linear thinking, or at least the need for a singular black and white answer about who Jesus is. Thankfully, that hymn we just sang set it up perfectly. We were steeped in the nature of paradox. And so the path has already been laid, but just in case you still might be getting worked up about a stranger who's going to boss you around, let me just say that I'm simply following Jesus's lead here. In the Gospel of John, he is using figures of speech as he does throughout this gospel to try to communicate the deep mystery about who he is, the nature of God, and who we are. But the figures of speech are, shall we say, less than perfectly consistent. This morning he's talking about a shepherd. But then, surprise, he says he's the gate, not the shepherd. But then, wait for it, in the very next verse, the verse that we actually don't hear this morning, he says, actually, I am the good shepherd. Now, we could get really worked up about all of this and look for creative stories about shepherds in the Middle East who lay down across the gap of their sheep enclosure at night, thus being both gate and shepherd, and those stories exist. Or we can simply follow Jesus's lead and explore the varied imagery. Work with it. So what's beneath the images of both gate and shepherd? The primary elements of these roles as we encounter them today seem to be protection and provision. Protection from evil, from those who seek to kill or steal or destroy, and provision of life, nourishment, abundance through travel to the right places. Whoever enters by me will be saved, and will come in, and will go out, and find pasture. And when we hear the word pasture, it does not simply mean a beautiful place. It means food. Food for life. And while there are many concepts here that invite further reflection today, I'd like to focus on the paradoxical movement that runs beneath the pastoral themes of our gospel, the 23rd Psalm, and even to some extent, the description of the early church that we heard from Acts. Because it seems no matter how you parse the small details, the bigger picture of our life under the shepherding of Christ is one of coming in and going out. Journey and rest. Peril and protection. Giving and receiving. Heading out and then safe haven again. Movement to and from the enclosure. Of course, we know this on some level. Our tradition teaches that both of these aspects are essential to the life of faith. We have lots of words for these two parts of dynamic movement in and out. Action and contemplation, mission and fellowship, the church that takes risks, and the church that offers retreat. Yet, like so many places of paradox, it is a constant challenge to keep this equilibrium, to hold on to both elements as essential and not favor one over the other. Although you do not know me, I hope that you can trust that it is no cheap shot to the church that I love, to the church that raised me, that most of the church communities I have known have tended to favor the image of life in Christ as a place of retreat, refuge, and peace over the life in Christ that journeys. When I was in middle school and my parents went through a divorce, the church was my refuge, my rock, my safe place. And this is a good and holy thing. But for finding abundant life in the long run, setting out to places of risk is also an essential part of the church life. The shepherd calls his own sheep by name, and he drives them out. He goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him. Now, wait a minute, you say. He drives them out? I thought he just leads them. And maybe you'll notice that this is not the translation we heard this morning, but it is a valid translation of verse 3. The same Greek word that in other cases is translated much more strongly. The Spirit drove Jesus into the wilderness. Same word. And to venture further into this theme of movement, I'd like to invite you into a fresh hearing of that old favorite, Psalm 23, with help on the Hebrew translation from Joel Lamont, the Old Testament professor at Emory University, because I studied Greek in seminary and not Hebrew. So I'm going to be leaning on his expertise here. But maybe I'm not alone in this. Here is the image of the 23rd Psalm that I've developed over time. It's a somewhat sentimental one, with a beautiful but hazy image of lounging in a green pasture, a lovely place by the lake with God, where there is comfort and peace, an ultimate reality of comfort that is true even when we face death. And much of that is based on the text. I'm not trying to take that away from you, but there is also a lot missing. Namely, that this favorite psalm describes an ongoing journey that God oversees and guides, a journey in which rest and nourishment are simply one part of a larger picture. So here's a fresh recap with a couple translation changes and annotations that emphasize accuracy and consistency with other Hebrew texts over how it's traditionally been translated. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He leads me beside still waters. He leads me into well-worn grooves of goodness that glorify God. When I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no evil. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me because they represent protection from real and present dangers. Goodness and mercy shall chase me and pursue me all the days of my life, and I shall continually return to God's presence my whole life long. How is Christ, the Good Shepherd, driving us out of our safe enclosures to find new nourishment, new life? Do we feel goodness and mercy on our heels, pursuing us even when we are not sure we're ready to leave the enclosure, not ready for a new journey with God? Today, I'd like to share with you a bit of what I see and hear on the journey with the people of St. Luke's Episcopal Church in San Diego's neighborhood of North Park, when God's grace helped open my eyes. My husband Colin and I have been sent to St. Luke's to serve as pastors and priests to the existing congregation, which is primarily Sudanese American refugees, and also to explore 21st century ways of being church and proclaiming the gospel. While we have not managed to find that perfect balance of rest and risk either, here is a few of the things I see on the journey as the Spirit of Christ leads us, drives us to new pastures of reconciliation and growth. I see a petite man and his even more petite wife filing into church week after week with their 5 children in tow. In the past few months, our choir has begun to sing beautiful songs in Swahili filled with harmonies. And it's led in part, this change, by this man and another one of his friends. They are both from the Congo, and so they speak French and Swahili, not English and Arabic like most of our congregants from South Sudan. And yet, when someone in the congregation caught wind that this man and his family were looking for a church back in October, they arranged for our 15-passenger van to pick them up each week because they don't have a car. And now the choir is singing more often in Swahili than in Arabic, because it turns out the choir is open to change. I hear my church leaders, most of whom have been in the U.S. for 15 years or more, say that what they want more than anything is for St. Luke's to be a place where new refugees find a sense of home, whether they are from the Sudan or elsewhere, just as the church did for them. And then I watch as they go out, make the calls and drive the vans and visit small apartments to pray with a family when they hear of a relative dying, even though they are struggling with a language barrier, just as I am. I see and hear the stream of men and women who gather in rooms below my office, singing together lines like Joni Mitchell's "I've looked at life from both sides now." They are part of the recovery community, those who have found healing in 12-step programs, and in the absence of other church programs, they have been the weekday blooms in the desert of our campus. About 16 groups meet each week in our small facilities. I see homeless men resting on stairs when I arrive at the office in the morning. And sometimes, depending on their number, it makes me a little nervous. And in the afternoons, lately I see 2 small girls resting on the same set of stairs. They come with their mom, who is also homeless, to pick up mail and toiletries and apply for jobs. And sometimes when I see them, I take a moment and am glad. I'm grateful that they are sitting here instead of on a busy sidewalk like they used to while their mother waited for these simple services. Both scenes on the stairs are because of an organization called Uptown Community Services, which has now makes its home at St. Luke's from 9 to 3 each weekday. Uptown is a faith-based nonprofit for the homeless, offering mail services, basic toiletries, and access to computer workstations. I hear word from the Uptown board and staff about what good news our space brings to their guests, especially access to 2 bathrooms and a courtyard to rest outside for a bit in the shade. I see shared dreams taking shape on the horizon, a partnership with the International Rescue Committee to develop our vacant lot next to the church into a small urban farm for recently resettled refugees, with integrated job training in a certified kitchen and a pop-up cafe right in the heart of our bustling neighborhood. I see 65 folks eating a potluck feast and listening to a reading from the Bible, which sounds pretty standard, but this is unlike any potluck I've ever been a part of before. I set the table with my favorite handyman from AA, filled flower vases with a stay-at-home mom from the neighborhood, and watched toddlers from her church test the vase's stability. Ate dinner with a lay leader from South Sudan while listening to 2 friends at our side who live on the street compare notes about their odd jobs hunt. It was a Maundy-Thursday community dinner that brought together folks from the congregation of St. Luke's, a nearby Nazarene church plant made up of mostly young families, the recovery communities that meet in our space, and also Uptown clients. We sang a hymn that made all the Episcopalians squirm. And then a woman who I'd never met before asked if she could wash my feet. There is more I could share, but let's pause there. Colin and I, my husband and I, are edging out of young adult status, but we still count as millennials, and we have a working theory about how evangelism, transformation, and conversion works most often with young adults. It does not belong to us, nor is it unique to us, and nor is it proven. But it finds a very welcome home with today's gospel, and it is central to our strategy at St. Luke's. Whoever enters by me will be saved, and will come in, and will go out, and find pasture. I came that they may have life, and have abundance. Coming in, going out, abundant life. The good news Jesus gives in this passage today is very dynamic, not a static outsider to insider invitation into the sheepfold. And for young adults on the lookout for truth and goodness in this crazy world, searching for truth with a capital T, beginning with an invitation to worship Jesus, who they may not yet recognize as the Good Shepherd, inviting them to join the flock in the enclosure, may not be the best place to start. It works for some, but not others. And so we have this idea that inviting them to journey alongside Christ followers as we do the sort of reconciling kingdom work of abundant life that Jesus taught us to do seems like a better place, maybe, to start. Praying and sharing experiences of God in our lives as we try to walk in the way of Jesus with the Spirit's help together. We are recruiting folks in the neighborhood into small groups, each group organized around a common project or mission that embodies in some way God's healing and justice. As we work together, our meetings will still be oriented around a common meal and prayer. We will still talk about God a lot. We will still rely on God's grace a lot. But we hope that these might be communities where people see Christ at work, get to know this man we call the Good Shepherd through experiences of transformation. Now, this is an initiative of the Diocese of San Diego. So in very important ways, you are already a part of this. You have joined us. What we learned will be shared with the diocese just as we continue to learn from all that you do. And we hope that other churches might learn too from our successes and failures. We are grateful for your support in these faithful experiments. And I'd like to share with you one final story of journeying to unknown places to close. On our first Sunday at St. Luke's, I looked out at the congregation as I offered my first homily, and I had a hiccup of faith. Was it really Christ who had called us here? Was it really Christ's voice we had heard when we felt this distinct call to this place? Because suddenly, as I looked out on the congregation, the real human differences between me, a young, white Anglo woman, and the Pan-African elders staring up at me from the first pews seemed too big. I said something meekly about God knowing each of us better than we know ourselves, and a few of the ladies nodded firmly. I drew breath again, but still weakly. And when the service was over, which, as you might imagine, had been something of an emotional roller coaster, I was starting to feel a little bit more on even keel again, a little bit safe, as I ate the delicious potluck feast that had been prepared to celebrate our arrival. But then something unexpected happened. My senior warden called me over to a side table where 5 of the matriarchs were sitting, these women who don't speak English as well as their children and grandchildren do. They want to speak with you, Joseph said. They have some things they'd like to say. And then, one by one, through Joseph's words of translation, I heard the most startling and Christ-like words of welcome I have ever encountered. We were praying for a leader, Rhoda said, and God sent us 2. I can see that you seek to walk in the ways of the Lord and will lead us, Tabitha said. God has sent us a wise daughter, and we are so happy you are here. We welcome you as a daughter and as a pastor all at once. Do you see this feast of grace, this unexpected pasture? I am a young white American woman with slave-holding ancestors who has never set foot on the great continent of Africa. Tabitha is an ordained deacon and a war widow who raised 6 children through famine and violence. There is no earthly logic that would unite us in love and trust, that would invite her to affirm and bless me in this way. Yet in God's kingdom, through Christ who reigns and has called each of us as his shepherd, Tabitha and I are indeed kindred. And for a moment, In the basement at St. Luke's, that knowledge moved from my head into my heart. I enjoyed, as I cried, a glimpse of a world transfigured, a source of faith, a pasture to feed on in years to come that I've never quite seen in this way. It was the grace and surprise of God's love overwhelming tired and feeble human patterns. Whoever enters by me will be saved, will be healed, and will come in and go out and find pasture. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. What voice do you hear? Where is Christ calling you as an individual, in your family, as a church community, to move, to journey, to risk, not for the sake of risk itself, but for life more abundant? We come in, we go out, and find pasture, nourishment we didn't even know existed. Do not be afraid to leave your safe places, your safe patterns, because God is alive and closer than you know, right on your heels, wherever you go.